Recording in progress.
Testing. There we go.
Here we go. Oh, there's my daughter. Right on time. Hi, Sarah. Also named Sarah. Welcome, everybody. My name is Ian Gerfield. I am the co-founder and namesake of Ian's Pizza and also the owner of Batch Bakehouse. Welcome to the Wisconsin Book Festival and tonight's event featuring Let's Make Bread, a comic book cookbook, a collaborative effort by Ken Forkish and Sarah Becan. So tonight we're joined by Sarah. Unfortunately, Ken is not with us, although I've heard that he has sold his businesses and moved to Hawaii. So Ken is definitely winning. Couple quick housekeeping things I've got to say. Big thanks to the Madison Public Library, 150 years. Also the Madison Public Library Foundation, and all the people that put this event on tonight. I'm looking at you, Jane Rotunda in the back. Also, anybody who did the AV, the janitors who keep this place clean, thank you all. Quick reminder, please turn off your cell phones. That's probably me. I'll do that in a second. There will be copies of the book for sale right outside the event space here. An incentive to go visit Sarah, maybe purchase a book and get her signature. I have brought loaves from Batch Bakehouse as well as cookies. So if you go see her, you can choose one. Okay, so quick introductions here. Sarah, I'm just going to read this from your book because it hits the mark. Sarah Becan is a comic artist, author, illustrator, and designer based in Chicago. She is also the creator of I Think You're Sawsome, a food-centric autobiographical webcomic. Sarah is the illustrator of Adventures of Fat Rice Cookbook and is the co-author and illustrator of Let's Make Ramen and Let's Make Dumplings. Her work has appeared in various publications, including Savoir, Eater, Organic Life, Star Chefs, and Tasting Table. Ken Forkish is the founder of Ken's Artisan Pizza and Ken's Artisan Bakery. He is the bestseller author of Evolutions in Bread and Flour, Water, Salt, and Yeast, which won both a James Beard and an IACP award, and The Elements of Pizza, which is a book I own and I highly recommend. Okay, so we're going to start tonight with a brief AV presentation, and then we'll dive into our discussion tonight. Sarah, take it away.
Testing? There we are. Hi. Okay. Try this one. Okay. All right. So, perfect. Sorry about that. Okay. So, hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Becan. Sorry to make you crane your necks in this direction. I've been drawing comics for about 20 years now, but I also do design and commercial illustration, mostly for restaurants and food publications. So, a lot of my work revolves around food and recipes. Most recently, my work has been focused on comic book cookbooks, so cookbooks that use the comic book format to demonstrate their recipes. I want to give you a little bit of a background on how I got here. Many years ago, I had an autobiographical webcomic that I called I Think You're Sawsome. I built myself a website, and I drew a short comic and uploaded it almost every day. It was usually about whatever was on my mind that day, but a lot of times it ended up being about food. So sometimes I would use the comic to try drawing a recipe I had made in a comic book format. I'm a visual learner myself, and it's easier for me to follow pictures and diagrams than large blocks of copy, and I wanted to draw recipes in a way that made sense to me, in a format that made sense. Sometimes I use the comic to draw meals I had at restaurants around Chicago, and this ended up being a great way to find illustration clients. One of my regular illustration clients was a Chicago restaurant called Fat Rice. They were an outstanding Macanese restaurant, so they were focused on this bombastic mashup of Chinese and Portuguese culinary traditions that comes out of Macau. And so I did posters for them, I did hot sauce labels, menus, t-shirt designs, anything they needed. They were a lot of fun to work for. Fat Rice eventually signed a book deal to produce a cookbook of their recipes that they called The Adventures of Fat Rice. And they asked me to contribute a bunch of illustrations for the final manuscript, including illustrating several of their recipes in this comic book format. The chefs at Fat Rice thought that using comics for their book would be fun and new, but they also noticed that the comic format had a way of making complicated ideas easier to understand. This was probably the first time that I started thinking deliberately about recipe comics and thinking specifically about the kinds of things that we can do with comics and illustration that aren't as easy to do with like writing and photography and other formats. So like, for instance, this is from their recipe for Hong Kong French toast. It was topped with these crispy egg threads that they like fried up in a wok. And the chef had this special motion where he would pour the egg mixture through his fingers while doing this before it goes into the wok. And he was like, how do I write that? Like, how do I write that down in words? And I was like, I can do it with motion lines in a single comics panel. So after the Fat Rice book came out, the publisher asked me if I would be interested in drawing a whole comic book cookbook of ramen recipes. So I found a chef to partner with. His name was Hugh Amano. He also helped write the Fat Rice book, so we'd work together. So he wrote and tested all the recipes, and I adapted them to a comic book format and illustrated everything. So for Let's Make Ramen, we wanted to use the comics format to make the ramen recipes as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. So if people can see simple drawings and a step-by-step recipe, it'll be easier for them to repeat those steps in their own kitchens. There are a lot of things that we can do with comics that we can't accomplish with writing alone or even with photography. You can use imagery and words together in comics, but you can also use the sequence of panels to show actions or the passage of time or a change in materials, all of which are super crucial to cooking and baking. So Let's Make Ramen ended up doing pretty well, and the chef and I pitched the idea of a dumplings book to the publisher, and they liked it. So again, for Let's Make Dumplings, our aim from the start was to make these recipes as accessible as possible. Some of the techniques involved in making dumplings at home can be kind of intimidating if you didn't grow up with it. Anyway, just as we were finishing up with Let's Make Dumplings, one of my editors was working on an updated cookbook for the 20th anniversary of flour, water, salt, yeast that they were calling Evolutions in Bread. And this editor really liked the idea of using the same comics treatment for Ken's recipes. And Ken Forkish, as it turns out, is a lifelong fan of Archie comics. So he was really excited about the idea too. And that's how we started working together. If you are familiar with Ken's books, they are phenomenal, massive, dense sources of knowledge. They're really heavy with very detailed information about not just what you do to make bread, but how and why, and like millennia of philosophy and history behind it. So I knew this was going to be a challenge to convert into a breezy and accessible comic book format. But from the start, my thinking was to treat Flour, Water, Salt, Yeast and Evolutions in Bread as if they were the course textbooks, and what we were doing was the workbook. So Ken would send me selected chapters and recipes from his books that he wanted included in Let's Make Bread, just in the same written text format that he has in his books. And it was my job to tease this information apart. In recipe comics, I really feel like in order for them to be effective, each discrete action in a recipe needs its own panel and its own illustration. And so sometimes that means turning a single sentence from Ken Forkish's book into like 4 or 5 solid panels. But typically, My process is to start simply by laying out the text in boxes on a page so that I can tailor exactly how much information I want projected and adjust things so that content falls where you want it to. I like to have a recipe start at the top left part of a spread and end at the bottom right if possible. And then I'll just add stage directions, little notes for myself about what imagery should accompany each panel. And this becomes extremely loose sketches just to make sure the ideas make any sense at all. And then I will refine those into something that other humans can read. So this would be what I would run past Ken and our editors just to make sure everything made sense and see if they wanted to make any changes. And then once that's approved, I can move on to colors and shading and final art. So I don't know if anyone here is familiar with the book Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. It's a great book about the history of comics as a medium, but it talks a lot about the fundamental visual vocabulary of comics. And one of the points that Scott makes in this book is in comics art, we often try to simplify the details of imagery in order to amplify the meaning of the imagery. So that means we reduce extra details and focus on just portraying the parts that the reader really needs to see to understand, and that gives the details that remain more emphasis. So if you can eliminate extra visual information that's not as important, you can reduce the process to simple outlines and shapes and make it easier for the home cook to understand the steps. Okay. Another interesting challenge that I've run into doing this work is that illustrations are by nature two-dimensional and static, and they serve just one sense, the visual. But food, as we experience it, isn't just visual, and it's definitely not static. It involves all of your senses. There's the taste of it, obviously, but there's also aroma and temperature and texture, and even the auditory experience of hearing something sizzle in a pan. So at one point when I was working on Let's Make Ramen, a friend asked me, how many eggs did you have to cook in order to draw what they look like? And I thought, I don't think I'm trying to draw what eggs look like. I think I'm trying to draw what eggs taste like. It was kind of a weird thought, but it made me realize something that I was already doing subconsciously. I want people to look at these illustrations and be able to almost taste it. I want to exaggerate the colors so that it evokes aroma and flavor. But Let's Make Bread was a very different experience. With ramen and dumplings, I was often trying to use illustration to evoke flavor and aroma, but with bread, I wanted to draw what the dough feels like in your hands. The way a sourdough culture changes over time is so crucial to the process. And one of the best ways to know if your culture is healthy is to drag your fingers through it and feel the complicated webbing texture underneath the surface. So working on Let's Make Bread became more about using illustration to try to evoke physical textures of materials to communicate how the dough feels in your hands through every stage of mixing and shaping and rising. I really like thinking about how to use artwork as a secondary visual language, if that makes sense. How to use it to communicate things to the reader that will make the whole process seem instinctively and even subconsciously easier for them to understand. I honestly believe that comics are kind of a perfect medium for recipes. They're so good at a really clear step-by-step and instructional process. And also, most readers have some level of familiarity with comics. A lot of us read newspaper comics or superhero comics or even manga when we were kids. So it's an approachable medium, it's relatable, and it's just a great format to make cooking more accessible to as many people as possible. And so that's my pitch. Please buy comic book cookbooks so that I can make more comic book cookbooks. Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. So I want to get one thing out of the way, that I loved your book.
Thank you.
But it actually didn't start off that way. In fact, when I was asked to do this event, and I shared this with Sarah, so it's not going to be a surprise. When I was asked to do this event and I was told this was a comic book cookbook, I was kind of skeptical. And actually, to be frank, a little judgy, because I'm a professional. I'm being asked to talk about a cookbook that's a comic book. I'm 48. I don't read comic books anymore, right? Anyway, as is the case when you point your one finger in that direction, there's three pointing back at you. your book came, and within 10 pages, I was like, oh, I was totally wrong. In fact, I think probably the most succinct way to describe it, I went from like comic book cookbook WTF to comic book cookbook OMG. It really blew me away. And the thing that I love is just how approachable this book is, and also that it doesn't lean into some dogma that other books that have to do with making dough do. So, for example, when the sourdough section, I have a book which says you have to feed your sourdough twice a day, every day, otherwise you will go to sourdough hell or something like that, right? And it's just not reality. I feed my sourdough maybe 2 times, or rather once every 2 or 3 weeks. I treat it like a bad friend, that I've left in the corner of the fridge. So, and it works. Tell me a little bit about just a brief history of your love for food and illustration, because clearly that didn't just happen overnight.
Yeah. So I feel like they're 2 different things. My love for illustration was from the very beginning. I was always drawing. I got in trouble in 6th grade science class because I had too many unicorns drawn in my science notebook. I had a 4-panel comic published in Cricket magazine when I was 9 years old. So I was always drawing. I always loved comics too. My grandfather had a collection of Walt Kelly Pogo books that I read when I was a little kid. He also had, what's his name? Crockett Johnson, Barnaby and Mr. O'Malley. So like very old classic comics that I was just crazy about. And it wasn't until college and someone handed me Art Spiegelman's Mouse that I was like, oh, look at all the things you can do with this medium. And I didn't know what I wanted to do then, but I knew I wanted to do something. Food I came to really late. Hopefully my parents won't see this, but they were not great cooks. I did not grow up in like a strong culinary tradition, learning lots of recipes from like my grandparents or my parents. Like my mom had the Betty Crocker cookbook and like some issues of Southern living, and that was it. And I thought I was a picky eater as a child, and I think it was just because they didn't know how to roast vegetables, So it wasn't until my 20s, I think, that I really came to the same sort of realization of like, look what you can do with food. And it kind of coincided with I moved to Logan Square in Chicago. Logan Square has lots of great restaurants. It was sort of the boom of the gastropub movement. And so like all of these restaurants were doing incredible meals, and they weren't very pretentious. And it's sort of like probably spawned, I Think You're Awesome. I was thinking so much about food and learning so many new things about food and cooking and ingredients that I'd never worked with before, and I just wanted to make comics about that.
Great. So you told us a little bit how this project came together. How long did it take you to complete it all? I mean, conceptually, there's obviously a process there, but then actually to draw it out, I'm a horrible illustrator, so I'm very jealous. But yeah,
it was from start to finish probably about 2 years. Now a lot of that was back and forth with Ken about what he wanted the book to be, and waiting for him to pick out recipes. And then I think the publisher ran through a couple of different people who were working on the panelization of it, and that wasn't really working out. So then I stepped in and I did the panelization. But I think, from start to finish, from when we first mentioned the project to when it was actually on sale, was about 2 years. Actively drawing it, I want to say 8 or 9 months. It's hard to exactly remember because I often split it up into, the layouts and the pencils is one thing, and then like the final art is another thing. But probably 8 or 9 months.
How much would you ever reach a point where you had to maybe redo a whole section because conceptually you rethought it? How's that process?
Not so much. That stuff was worked out in the layout stage, and where I have just the text and boxes. Most of that conceptually was already figured out. So the first book that I did, Let's Make Ramen, was all marker and watercolor, and I still have a stack of originals. But after that, I started to learn how to draw digitally, just because it's so much faster and so much easier to make changes. So, yeah, I never had to redo a whole section, although there were plenty of places where, where Ken was like, that's not exactly what the dough looks like at that stage, and we would go back and forth.
Got it. graphic novels, or I'm sorry, comic books. I keep calling it graphic novel. Comic books are a new medium for most people for cookbooks. So have you gotten any pushback on that, or
I mean, you
what's
always
reception?
get. I mean, I feel like I don't think I get pushback once people see it. It does surprise me that even in this day and age, after so many different comics and graphic novels have come out about all sorts of different things, that you'll still see an article that's like, comics, they're not just for kids, like, we should know this by now. Like, you can do so much with this. No, typically when I'm at a show and I'm selling the books and people pick them up and flip through it, they'll be like, this is such a good idea. And I'm like, yes, it is. Yes, thank you. No, I mean, I feel like a lot of people are kind of quizzical about it at first, but once they see it in practice, it makes sense to them.
Well, I'm one over, so you got me. Graphically representing some of the more nuanced aspects of making food can be really challenging. How were you able to work through some of those challenges?
Bread was a really interesting challenge. Like, I was very excited to get this project, and then about halfway through, I was like, everything is beige. And I rely, I rely on colors so much to sort of evoke flavors and aromas, like I was talking about. Like, color, exaggerated colors especially, is a solid shorthand for me with this. But everything in bread is brown and beige, so that was a challenge. And honestly, nailing the interior texture of bread, that took me 2 weeks. Like, I spent 2 weeks puzzling over like how I wanted to draw that to make it looks realistic, but also look soft and also look appetizing. And I mean, that was a major headache. And I experimented several times and sent it to a lot of my friends to see what they thought. Because like, if you stare at something for too long, it stops making sense to you. But yeah, like, the biggest challenge with bread was mostly color and like I was talking about, getting the textures right.
What was it like working with Ken, and did you get to go to Hawaii?
I did not get to go to Hawaii, unfortunately. We did a lot of video chats, and his house is lovely, and there's palm trees and the ocean outside, and it's fantastic. And he's down there with like his golden retriever. And I think he is like once a month baking pizzas at a resort. Like, that's the amount of work that he does. So
Repeat, Ken is winning.
Right. It's like he's living his best life. But no, he was very charming. Like, we had a whole lot of video chats, from the beginning to the end of the project. Every time developmental edits or text edits came in from the editor, we would get on the video chat and go through them together one by one. And he was very magnanimous, very charming, very happy to explain anything to me. So yeah, he was great. He was marvelous to work with.
How much did you bake while you were writing this book?
I baked every single recipe. Before I started this project, I thought I was bad at baking. I tried a couple of times to bake different things, and they didn't work out right away. So I was just like, well, I'm not good at this. Like, I'm good at cooking. I understand cooking. I don't understand baking. But when this project came in, I was like, I need to understand everything about this process if I'm going to write it so that other people can understand this process. So I baked every single loaf multiple times, and by the end of it, I had a sourdough culture that I'm very pleased with. Her name is Breadwig, and she still lives in my fridge. She's extremely strong, and I bake out of her every week, and yeah.
I will confess, I also gave my starter name. Her name is Rona because it was started during COVID. I've tried to kill Rona a couple times, but she's very resilient. Any favorite recipes?
The multigrain bread was definitely a big favorite in our house. You start it by taking 120 grams of any kind of heavy grain, so like rolled oats or buckwheat groats, anything that you can find, and you soak them overnight so that they soften before you bake them into the bread, and they make a really nice tooth. But then you also use the water from soaking the grains in the bread mix, so the whole bread has this really deep, flavorful, it's fantastic. I loved that one, although I mostly do the country bread now that I have Breadwig because she's so strong, and it's like a 100% 100% sourdough. You don't use any extra commercial yeast in it.
Do you think someone needs any kind of baking experience to approach this book, or no?
No. I think that this is a really good entry point for beginners. Because in a lot of ways it was the entry point for me too. Like, this is how I learned how to bake. And I think I don't think you need any baking experience to start with this. It's a much simpler approach to Ken's methods than his books. Like, his books are great too. But they're like the advanced course. So if you don't have any experience with bread, this is a great place to start.
Any aha moments while you were doing all those test bakes? Do you ever feel like you broke through as a baker while baking a lot of bread?
Yes. Okay. I know a lot of people say that cooking is art and baking is science. And on many levels, this is true. But there was a moment, probably like 30 loaves in, where I was like, oh, baking is art too. And you can, if you do it enough, you can really gain an instinct for how your dough is doing just by feeling it. Like, so Ken's bread recipes they're very high hydration. So you're not doing like a whole lot of really intense kneading. You're just doing 3 sets of folds. So like, you just fold this wet dough over, and then you leave it alone for 30 minutes, and then you fold it over again and you leave it alone. And like, by the third fold, the texture and the character of the dough has changed so much. And I'd gotten to the point where I was like, now I know it's going to be good because I can feel it. I can feel the elasticity. And so it felt artier and less sciencey. I think it kind of felt like, this is gonna sound so new agey, but it felt like a conversation between me and the dough. Like, it felt like I understood it. Like,
I know exactly what you're talking about. Which, actually speaking, but something I thought a lot about, especially with making pizza dough in my case, how long do you think it takes for someone to really develop a feel for dough?
I mean, for me, it took like, I want to say maybe 2 months. It took like a solid dozen loaves probably before I was like, it made sense in the process, and I understood why certain doughs had failed and certain ones hadn't.
So one of the things that I've learned over time is that every oven is kind of different. And any advice for someone who at home may not have a great oven, or any kind of workarounds that?
I mean, that's a good question. I feel like, so Ken recommends getting like an in-oven thermometer so that you can, because a lot of times the temperature dial on your oven isn't perfectly accurate to what the actual temperature is. So that's a way to double check it. I almost feel like I ran into fewer problems with the oven, than I did with trying to get the dough to rise properly, especially in Chicago. You guys probably know this in Madison too. Like, if you're trying to bake in the middle of winter and you live in a drafty century-old apartment building, like, it's hard to It's, the temperature, Ken likes to say, temperature is one of the ingredients in the bread recipe, and time is one of the ingredients in the bread recipe. And once you sort of get an instinct for how those things are changing while you're I found all sorts of different ways to try to keep dough warm in the middle of winter while it was rising.
What were your tricks?
The standard one is, you put it in the oven with the light on, and that helps. My grandmother used to have this trick where she'd put it in the oven and then put like a pan full of boiling water underneath it. I put mine on top of my Wi-Fi router once. I have a seedling heat mat that I tried using. Honestly, the oven with the light on is not half bad. That ended up being the go-to. Our grandmothers were right.
I used to do all those things, and then I think I bought my wife a bread proofer that was secretly for me. So it's a little pricey, but I highly recommend it if you're going to bake dough frequently at home.
Yeah.
This is your this is your third graphic. There I go again. Your third comic cookbook.
You can call it a graphic novel.
Yeah, but Connor was going to judge me over here. So this is your third comic book cookbook. You've got a fourth project you told me that's coming out. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Let's Make Cocktails is coming out in April. This one is one that I did on my own, too. No co-author, so I'm very nervous about it, but also very excited for everyone to see it. Again, 2 years start to finish, lots of research. I have a stack of cocktail books in my kitchen, and testing was very fun. I didn't do it myself. I had a series of small cocktail parties and had people over so that nobody's health was in danger.
When is that book coming out?
That'll be in April.
Great. Any other food genres that you want to tackle? Anything that you're thinking about for your fifth project?
So the next project, fingers crossed, nothing set in stone, will probably be cookies, which will be a lot of fun to draw. I have a couple of dream projects, definitely. I would have to find the right partner for this one, somebody with a lot of knowledge about the history of this, but I would love to do a book on curries, because I feel like we use the same word to mean so many different kinds of dishes, from the West Indies all the way to Japan, and they're all so different, but they're also great, and also connected by, the terrible history of colonialism, but that would be interesting too. And I mean, it would also be difficult to draw, because curries are, they would just be masses of color, and it's hard to find differentiated ingredients in that, but I would be up to that challenge. So that one's a dream one.
If anybody knows someone that can collaborate
Does
with
anyone
Sarah
know
on
a
that project,
curry
please speak up.
historian?
Anything else you want to share with our audience today about this project or any other project that you've done?
Man, I don't know. Okay. One of the fun things that I learned making Let's Make Bread, and I don't think Ken subscribes to it, but I love this idea. I don't know if you've read about this. There's a theory that we all have microcosms on our hand, and that the yeast and bacteria on our hands informs the starters that we make and the doughs that we build. And so the more you bake, the better you get at it. And again, it becomes this conversation between you and the dough as it evolves. Again, very, very new agey, a little bit woo-woo, but I really love the idea of it. I love the idea. I mean, it feels very synergistic. It feels very nice. And it also makes sense that I started out being very bad at baking, and I got better at it over time.
Have you heard this, like, it's a myth now that I've seen like magazines that will sell a starter that was started in Italy 200 years ago, and it's all, I've learned, kind of BS, because effectively your starter, it captures the yeast that's in your environment. So even if it was seeded 200 years ago, whatever happened 200 years ago is not there anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I recently, this is a little off topic, but I recently was in Armenia for 2 weeks teaching a comics course to teenagers over there. And I was talking to baker Andrew Janjigian before I went, and I was like, I would have enough time over there to start a starter. Should I start an Armenian starter and bring it back home? And he said the same thing. Like, it would be different then, but the second you bring it back home, it's going to start attracting the yeasts and the bacteria that are in your Chicago apartment, and it'll end up being just like Breadwig. So I was like, well, it's one less thing for me to do over there.
By the way, there's a very funny comedian named Charlie Berens. He's Wisconsin-based. He has a video that came out recently about like secretly selling starter as if he's a drug dealer. Like, it's very funny. It's worth looking up and watching.
Love that.
We're going to open it up to questions from the audience. I'm ahead of schedule here, but we'll keep the conversation going. So,
what sort of field testing do you do for a from your comic book for a non-baker to you, to find out how well written the instructions are?
Ah, interesting. I feel like I don't really do that, and partially because I feel like I'm the beginner, like, because I came to food so late and I still feel like a little bit remedial. I figure if the comics make sense to me, that it'll make sense to other people. So no, I don't usually like show the comics to like a test group before we move on to publishing, other than like all of the editorial team and design team at the publisher.
Is there anybody else who's working in this format?
Yeah, there are a few. We're trying to make this a thing. Before, let's see, around the same time that the Fat Rice book came out, 10 Speed also published Robin Ha's book, Cook Korean, which is a comic book cookbook. So she preceded my stuff. Also, Lucy Knisley, if anybody knows her, she's a comics artist. She's never done a full comic book cookbook, but she published a comic book memoir called Relish that has many comic book recipes in it. It's excellent. My publisher recently put out a Thai comic book cookbook called Noodles, Rice, and Everything Spice, by two Thai, a Thai cook and a Thai comic book illustrator. Other than that, I think we're working on it. I know an artist named Linda Yee is working on a Szechuan comic book cookbook, and I've seen some of her comics on Instagram, and they're fantastic too. So, more people should do. Like I've said, I feel like it makes so much sense to me. I mean, obviously I'm biased. I want to make more of these, but it makes so much sense to me for comics to be used in this format that I'm really excited to see as many people doing this as possible.
I agree.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Oh, Sarah.
Is it easy to draw?
I feel like, okay, drawing is always work. Even when it's fun, it's always work. Some things definitely get easier over time. Some things don't. I feel like hands are always going to mystify me. They don't make any sense at all. They're such weird shapes. But I don't know, I think parts of it definitely feel easy, but for the most part, as long as it's fun, even if it's work, you don't notice how hard the work is.
Right over here, please.
Do you have a favorite tool for art and a favorite tool in the kitchen?
Ooh, okay. Well, watercolor is my medium. I love watercolor and gouache. Although, like I said, I've shifted to digital, and it breaks my heart a little bit just because with these deadlines, you have to work as fast as possible. And edits too. Edits are so much easier with digital. So I use Procreate on an iPad Pro with just an Apple Pencil, and I have a couple of favorite brushes that I use with that. But traditional media, I love markers, I love watercolors, I love gouache. And then in the kitchen, that's a really good question. I don't know. I don't know if I have a favorite tool in the kitchen. Wait, no, okay, I will say one thing. Bread-wise, Andrew Janjigian, again, this baker out of Boston, he recently sent me, he makes this bespoke tiny whisk for stirring sourdough in a tall, narrow container. And it's got this antique handle, and it's really nice. It also works for stirring natural peanut butter. It's just a very sturdy, weird, narrow whisk that I like a lot.
I'm going to highly recommend, if you do buy this book and decide to start making bread, that a bench scraper is an absolutely essential tool. In fact, I just actually read that a lot of just line cooks at restaurants have a bench scraper because it helps them to clean up.
Yeah.
They're $3, great Christmas gift.
I mean, you can get fancier ones, but I've got a plastic one that cost me $4 at King Arthur, so.
Very handy,
Yeah,
yes.
totally.
I've got 3, probably too many, but yes. Sunny.
I have a question. When you're collaborating, not the case in your new book,
Yeah.
but in the ramen book or the dumpling book or this book, were you ever working through a recipe to test it so you understood it and encountered a scenario where you're like, I wonder if this would be a better way, right? Like a correction that needed to be made or a comment.
Yeah.
You're illustrating their work, but was there ever any push-pull in that, we should do it maybe folding like this, or?
No, I never did that. I certainly never felt like I could do that with Ken, just because he's so accomplished and his work is so thorough. There were a number of times where I ran into a problem and I would run back to him and I'd be like, "Why isn't this working?" And he'd be like, "Oh, you need this and this and this." No, I don't think so. I think there were a number of things that I tested from Hugh's recipes too, and they ended up just being great. Never pushed back on trying to change their recipes. Occasionally pushed back on how they were laying how he thought we needed to talk about the steps. And I was like, I've done this in the kitchen, and I think it's going to make more sense for a beginner to do it this way instead, but never push back on the recipes themselves. Yeah. Yeah.
Connor.
My question's for both of you. Do you have like a white whale bread project or something that you're like, someday I'll bake baguettes or something, whatever?
So I actually did try baguettes recently, and I don't think I was great at them, but they ended up tasty. It's shaping is always difficult of like the stranger loaves. My real white whale baking wise, which I have just started to revisit, is my grandmother's kolaches recipe. She was Czech, and she would make these great little pastries. I tried to use a recipe once long before this, kind of sucked at it and gave up. But after like working my way through this project, I was like, maybe it's time to try those again. And now I've made several batches that are really good. And so now I want to make like a little mini comic of kolache recipes.
For me, and there's a recipe in here for it, is pecan raisin or raisin walnut bread. I love, and we don't bake one at Batch, much to my disappointment. So I have to do it myself, and I was really very happy to see there's one in here.
I slid in late, so forgive me if you cover this in the first part of your talk. But I'm interested in how you break down the story of the recipe into your frames and panels. So like a filmmaker, right, you gotta figure out, what am I gonna put a box around?
Yes.
Right? And so is there something you can talk about in the Red Book or in one of the other of your books about how you took the thing that we all know is a recipe and turn it into those separate pieces?
Yes. Okay. So I feel like this is a little bit more art than science too, but generally I try to make each discrete action in a recipe its own panel, its own illustration. There could be a push and pull on that because obviously sometimes people are going to understand. You have to think about your audience and what they're going to take for granted and what information is going to be new to them. But like, let's see, do I have anything? Like with Ken's like shaping and mixing diagrams, I was always like, well, he says in his thing, this is the motion that you make. You wrap your hand around it and you pinch. And not only that, but you do it 5 times. And so I was like, well, let's go ahead and make like smaller, illustrations that show that pinch, 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 pinch to really drive home that these are the motions that you do. And this was like the introductory, the fundamental steps of bread baking. So we didn't have to do this for every single recipe, but we really wanted to drive home like these are the this is the simplest way to show each of these motions. I feel like it changes for everything, for every project that I do, but my general answer is every discrete action needs to have its own drawing.
Kind of related to that too is how much knowledge do you assume that readers have? I've taught cooking classes, and I used to, blogs aren't around anymore, but I used to have a food blog, and it's like, how much do I assume that people know?
Yeah.
And that's it's always kind of a struggle to, even the word saute.
Exactly.
Not everybody knows what the word saute means.
Yeah. Well, I feel like, I don't know how many people have seen the show Schitt's Creek. If you've seen that scene where they're like, what does it mean to fold in the cheese? How do you fold? This is wet. You can't fold it. For these books, for the comic books, this is actually a discussion I was having with my editors not too long ago. Is like, now that it's becoming a series, we don't have an official mission statement or anything, but if there was one, it would be, we want to make things as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. So I try to assume mostly a beginner level for all of these books, and to try, we end up explaining a lot of things that I think many seasoned bakers would already understand, but we really want these to be ground floor type things that any beginner baker could pick up and learn how to do in their own kitchen without too much effort.
watched him test your recipes and go get different equipment, and I was like, it makes so much sense to put it in a clear bin instead of a ceramic bowl that you can't see. And I also want to say you nailed like the tensile strength of doughs and the texture of crumb versus crust.
Oh my God.
Because I work in a bakery and I have to explain this to people all the time or teach the language of bread
Yeah.
to our retail staff. And I'm going to use your book.
Oh my God, thank you. That's amazing. Thank you.
Because it makes perfect sense. Like there's no way, the picture is better than all of the sentences.
Yeah. Ooh, okay, so I use a couple of custom ones that I found online. My favorite one is called Strathmore. That one is what I use for pretty much all of my outlines, all of my hard outlines. The new cocktail book, I found a set of watercolor brushes that I really like. But yeah, for the most part, I use brushes that I found on the internet rather than the stock ones that Procreate has, although they have some good ones too.
We tend to bake bread in the winter, and it's very cold.
Yeah.
And mine doesn't always turn out. And can you recommend that I turn the heat up to 80 degrees? I don't get it.
Yeah. Okay, so there's all sorts of tricks. We were kind of talking about leaving it in the oven with the light on, or putting it in the oven with, like I really do like if you put, like if you boil water in a kettle and you pour it into a pan and put that in the oven with your bread, then not only does it heat up the temperature, but it also makes it very moist, like it makes the air very humid, which helps a lot. I mean, you can try putting it on your Wi-Fi router. That did work for me one time. If you have, I guess any equipment in your house that tends to heat up a little bit, like a computer or something, a computer tower that might have a little bit of warmth to it. But honestly, I feel like the oven trick is the solid one.
My go-to is heating up a pan of water and then just putting it into the oven chamber. That kind of reliably gets, at least in my house, the oven to like 85 degrees or so.
Yeah.
And then I just check it every hour and it comes down a little bit and I do the process all over again.
Yeah, because you can always go back and put another pan, like refresh the boiling water in there and bring the temperature back up too. Because I agree, like you want the bread when it's cold outside. Like it tastes and smells great when it's cold outside, but it's also, it's hard to wrestle with the dough at that time of year too.
Well, I have a friend who makes perfect bread all the time. Oh, wow. But she has in-floor heated floors. And so she puts it on the floor, and it's perfect.
Yeah,
Here's
I had an old apartment with like creaky old radiators, and they were awesome for that.
Here's what I'm going to say that's so great about attempting to bake bread at home is that even if it doesn't come out like warm bread out of the oven, even if it's not great bread, is great. So if you just slather some butter on it, it's irresistible. And I say that from personal experience because during COVID, I took a dive into the tartine bread book, and my loaves like pancaked out, and I was really upset. But like when that bread was hot, oof, it was hard to beat. Sonny.
I have two questions that remind me of Adam. One is, when you eat bread now, can you diagnose it? You're like, this is underproved. And then my second question, knowing your partner and his great love of fun, were there any other names in the running for bread bake?
I mean, it was my first Levain culture was Breadword. Yeah, I don't know. He suggested Johannes Glutenberg one time, which I was like, that's great, but also it's too long. I'm not going to write that on the container. And then I felt like I had to. I was like, I need you to know that I mean Bredwig and the Angry Inch, and not Bredwig from Harry Potter. And he's like, I know. In terms of diagnosing, I don't know. I think so. Like not from tasting it, but from seeing how it comes out of the oven. I'm always like, I mean, honestly, my biggest problem is always that I didn't shape it well enough. But I've been doing a lot of pan breads, and if you do like a loaf pan, the pan kind of shapes it for you. So that's very helpful too.
The thing I really loved about this book is Ken's method for when you assess that your dough has proof to the right height, if you will. And I actually went out and I bought a 6-quart tub, just like he recommends, and the method is pretty foolproof.
It really is. And I'm like, when I started testing these recipes at the beginning of this project, I was like, I don't need to buy extra equipment. I'm going to do this in the bowl. But it makes all the difference because it rises to exactly, like you can see exactly where it is and know exactly how far it's gone and how many more hours you have before that dough is going to be, yeah, getting like, and it's not, their Cambros are not that expensive. The 6-quart dough tub like changed the game for me too.
The other thing I absolutely loved is that he does not recommend scoring the bread, and that absolutely killed me.
Yeah.
When I was trying the tartine loaves, I totally sucked at scoring my bread, and I just followed the instructions, put it seam side up, and it came out looking really nice.
Yeah, he posted a picture of a loaf he made from the book, and it looks just like the cover. It's incredible.
It's if you go to the Wisconsin Book Festival socials, it's on there. My wife took the pictures.
Excellent.
Yeah, it was great. Really, really great.
Do you have any advice for making a comic book for someone who wants to?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I mean, my first advice is make the comic book. Like, just draw it, just do it. I mean, I feel like when I started doing this, it was like the internet was a different world. And so it was a lot easier to be like, well, I'm going to make a webcomic. And then that webcomic turned into paying jobs. I don't know how often that happens these days. But, well, except that, no. I mean, I feel like Robin Ha's book happened because she was putting pictures up on Tumblr. She was drawing like banchan recipes on Tumblr, and the publisher came and found her. And like, I think if you find like something that you really love to write and make comics about, like that passion is going to show through and people are going to be attracted to it no matter where you end up sharing that. If that's like you print the comic out and like take it to your local comic book store or your library, there's a zine library here, it's great. Or if you put it up on the internet or whatever, like I think as long as it's something that you like truly care about, then it's going to be great. Like, I mean, I feel like I don't have much practical advice. I'm not going to be like, get a brush pen and get Bristol paper or whatever. Find the materials that make drawing feel easy and fun to you, and then find a topic that makes researching it feel easy and fun to you, and share those comics wherever you want to share them. Like, there's so many different ways to do it that I don't really have a roadmap.
For cocktails, you've got glassware and a variety of colors that you wouldn't have explored in the first 3 books. But still, like, it's recipe book 4. So for you, what kept it being a pleasure?
So like I said, bread was a lot of beige and brown, and dumplings had other colors too, but all those dumplings are wrapped in dough, and that dough is also beige. So I was really, really excited for cocktails because glassware, reflections in glassware, all of the colors of the garnishes, like there's like a real explosion of color that you can experiment with for that. For the cocktail recipes too, I tried very hard to, pretty much every cocktail recipe fits on a single page. So every recipe is a spread where the left-hand spread is a little bit of history and context of this cocktail, where it came from, how long we've been making it, what it tastes like, and then the next page is how to make it. And that was really exciting to me to have that formula where like every time you turn the page, it's a new cocktail, and you learn about it and then you can make it. And then you turn the page, you learn about it, and then you can make it. So I liked that. I also set up, in the first part of the book, there's a whole section on techniques that I hired a bartender friend to help me with. And he came over and he demonstrated all the techniques and told me all the things that he thinks about at work. And so we have like a spread that's all about shaking and why you shake instead of stirring. And then a spread that's all about stirring and how that's different from shaking, and a spread on atomizing or rinsing, and a spread on expressing citrus, and all of like the techniques that you're going to need for the recipes coming up, so you don't have to explain those in every single recipe. Like I'm actually very proud of how the book is organized. I feel really good about it. And it was really interesting. I'll say this: like I love collaborating with people, but there were I mean, and there's good and bad things about both, but in some ways, making the cocktail book on my own was easier because none of these guys know how to write for comics, and they don't really kind of understand comics as a format, as a medium. So when I was writing, I knew I was writing the script from the start for comics, and it was tailored from the beginning for that, and I didn't have to wrestle. Like some of Ken's materials was very difficult to wrestle with in order to pare down the information into really simple bite-sized pieces, panel by panel. But for the cocktails one, I was able to do that from the start.
Any other questions? We've got 5 minutes left. Then I think we'll wrap it up.
Thank you
Thanks
so
to Sarah.
much. Thank you. And thank you for Ian, too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really love being here.
Again, Sarah will be signing books right out front, and there are batch treats and bread. You do not need to purchase a book to get a batch treat. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you so much.